and she was mistress of her trade.
Diddle all the day.
I put my hand upon her toe, Mark, well, what I do say?
She says, young man, you're rather low for the diddle all the day.
I put my finger on her knee.
Well, what I do say?
She says, young man, you're rather free
For the diddle all the day.
I put
My arm around her waist, Mark, well, what I do say? She says, young man, you're in great place for the diddle all the day.
I
Put my hand upon her thigh, Mark, well, what I do say? She says, you're getting pretty nice, diddle all the day.
I put my
Hand upon her ass, Mark, well, what I do say? She says, let's lay down on the grass and diddle all the day. And we diddle did too.
It's that time. It's time for Talk Gaming. There's so many buttons to press in these moments. I never know what to do. It's FaceTime. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk Gaming. We're going to have some fun. A fair amount of stuff to discuss over the course of today's episode. A few larger topics and broader topics. Nothing too crazy, nothing crazy controversial. Keeping it light, keeping it fun. As always, if you have any thoughts, drop them in the comment section or in the, I guess if you're watching this afterwards, in the comment section. If you're with us live on Twitch right now, you can throw it in the chat. As always, if you're watching this recorded after or listening to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify, you can listen and watch live on Twitch. Just make sure you follow me on Twitter so you're notified of whenever we go live. You follow me on Twitch so you get the notifications. You know the drill. I'm sure I don't need to repeat it. I should put my phone on silent. Be professional, right? My roommate is getting the S10 Plus. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's a damn sexy phone, I will say. And I've been very, very tempted to pursue that phone. However, I'm a big fan of the Notes, and I'm going to hold out for the Note 10, and I think I'm going to be very happy that I did because they are good looking phones, and just the rumors alone are fairly impressive and fairly exciting. Let me close these windows so I can actually see what chat is saying, because as always I value your opinions because I'm cool. Yeah, you better note me, Simple Yak. I have high expectations. As always, let me pop over here. The title story of the episode, we're going to tackle that first and cover it. I talked a little bit about this, and yeah, we're jumping right into it, and then we'll kind of move on from there. Yeah, we got to close all the fur hub tabs. For those of you not aware, I've been doing, I guess I can show you this first. I am currently prepping for a production of Avenue Q. If you don't know what Avenue Q is, I want like an actual production of it. I've been prepping for a production of Avenue Q, and I'm very, very excited. It's super fun. It's a hilarious show. I can't play any of the actual audio, otherwise we will definitely get taken down. This is from back when it like first launched, and it's like a full-on Muppet show, but it's super adult and mature. So it's basically what would happen if the Muppets grew up. So there's a bunch of F-bombs, and like there's a big number in it where the song is called "The Internet is for Porn." And the whole song just goes through all these great things the internet does, but all we really use it for is porn. So there's a bunch of bumper stickers you can get that are in the theme of this show that are called like their fur hub in the format of Pornhub. It's pretty fun. I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. It's a really funny show. It's good. In fact, tonight I've got to run off and do a rehearsal because I'm doing the understudy for the lead role. And if you're not familiar, I'll rant about this real quick because I can't rant about it to anybody else because it just comes off as whiny. But I'll rant about it real quick, then we'll get into the interesting topics that you probably came here for. When you do an understudy for a role, like whether it's in a musical or a play, or a film, if that even is a thing. What happens is that you are asked to learn the part that you're understudying and be able to drop in and perform that no matter what, whenever something happens. So usually for longer runs, you'll be doing like matinee performances. You'll be doing like if the person that normally plays the role is sick or just isn't feeling well, you'll jump in and do it. So it removes a lot of the pressure from just performance in general. So it can be very, very nice to have that ability to just have peace of mind. You don't have to stress about making sure that you stay super healthy, because if something happens, you have a backup plan. The difficulty with this, of course, is that you are tasked with learning the role in just as high quality a way as the actual lead, but you're usually not given any of the resources. So the lead gets all of the rehearsal time. They get all the one-on-one time with the director and with the choreographers and with costumers or whoever it may be. They get all that one-on-one time to really own in on their performance. And then the understudy is just kind of frantically doing it all themselves, trying to throw something together so that if something were to happen, they can perform it and the audience wouldn't be completely pissed. Because after all, if you're the understudy and you're not given any of the tools and you perform and it's terrible because you never got to rehearse it, the audience is going to be pissed, and will have done you more long-term damage than if they had just canceled the show to begin with. So it's a balancing act for sure. It's a delicate thing, but we're on it. Yes, you better believe I got the coffee. I'm not messing around today. We're not. So yeah, I'm doing other stuff in the show, of course, too. Like I'm not just the understudy, but it's when they throw the understudy on it as well, it gets very, very exhausting because you have to do a lot of work without any of the support, and certainly without any of the accreditation. That sounds right. That somebody else would get. I don't know why that's so loud. You might not have been able to hear that. I don't know, let me know if you heard that notification pop up, because it's very loud for me. I'm gonna mute it. Anyway, so the first thing I want to talk about is that The Last of Us Part 2, there was a rumor, it leaked out of a Peruvian game distributor, that there is allegedly going to be an October 2019 release for The Last of Us Part 2. There's some reasons why this could make sense, and there's some reasons why this wouldn't make any sense. First of all, the company law gamers, like, this does not seem... I mean, again, I'm not from Peru. I'm not Peruvian. So I don't know if that's the case, but it like, this doesn't seem to be a typical or a standard, I suppose, marketing material piece. This seems very boring. And maybe I'm just spoiled, but this seems like a very bland cover for the game. I mean, I guess it falls in line with what the original Last of Us did, but it just seems very low effort across the whole thing. And then the only part that tells us October 2019 is this little thing right here that says launching October 2019, or releasing effectively. And if that's the case, great. But as for why this could or couldn't make sense, first of all, Sony for years has had a pretty standard release structure where what they'll do is they'll have a spring flagship, maybe two spring flagships, depending on what the lineup is and what like demographic they tackle. And then they'll also have a fall flagship that sells going into the holiday season. So, for instance, Spider-Man was their holiday flagship this past year, and that did a lot of the heavy lifting. And then God of War was their spring flagship that did all the heavy lifting throughout the summer. So they usually have one in each season, one that focuses on the summer crowd, and then one that focuses on the winter and holiday crowd. And it's pretty standard. They've done this for years and years and years at this point. But as with all of these things, there are some exceptions to the rule. Specifically in this case, we're getting ready for the launch of the next generation of consoles. So PlayStation 5 is on its way. It is. It's unclear when we'll get an announcement or an unveil. It'll either be late 2019, so sometime around December, probably, or they'll hold out and they'll show it off sometime early 2020, hopefully for sale by the end of 2020, which would make sense. It's in line with the rest of their release schedules. Everything kind of lines up. And especially at this point, why I think it makes a lot of sense is because I think what they're going to do is they're going to push for Horizon Zero Dawn 2, so maybe Horizon 1 Dawn or something like that. I think they're going to be pushing for that to be a launch title, and they're going to put that alongside. And I think that they're going to push that either early 2021 or late 2020. I can't imagine they had to do a whole lot of rebuilding after the original Horizon Zero Dawn. It seems like that engine was structured and built in a very future looking way. It's very cutting edge. It's phenomenal. That's why Hideo Kojima's using it. So I can't imagine they had to do a whole lot of building from the ground up, unless they're doing something really, really outrageous and new and different, in which case maybe another year is necessary. But usually sequels they can pump out in 2-3 years without much of an issue. And let's be real, they're not working on anything else. They're working on another Horizon Zero Dawn. No doubt in my mind, especially after the end. No spoilers, but after the end of Horizon Zero Dawn, they make it very clear they're going to be heading somewhere. And then you play the DLC, and it was a little underwhelming. Yeah, no, I could talk about Horizon Zero Dawn all day. I feel like I should do a critique of it, but I need to just go back through and play it all over again with a fresh mind. Leesky asks, do you see the PS5 being like an extension of the PS4 Pro? To be honest, like, we heard all those reports in 2014, 2015 that this was going to be the last generation of modern consoles as we know it, right? So it would be the last time, at least as it was implied, that you would buy a console and that console would play games that were exclusive to that console, and you wouldn't be able to play the older games on it, and you couldn't play the newer games years later on it. It was going to be one and done. That was it. I don't see that being the case, especially Sony. Sony has made millions upon millions upon millions of dollars off of the exclusivity model and way of structuring their business. If I were them, I wouldn't change it. It certainly isn't broken. To keep pushing PlayStations as the exclusive location for narrative-driven, high-quality exclusives, it's the way you do it. And they're making plenty of money. It's not broken. People aren't complaining about it. Some people are, but most of those are Xbox gamers. So it's just not quite the same thing, you know? But I have to imagine the PS5 is going to throw in some, and same with whatever the next Xbox is. I have to imagine they're going to throw in some crazy hardware that's just going to take it to a whole nother level. And as to what that means, like specifically, whether they choose to go the route of like ray tracing and make that the flagship topic, I don't think they're going to double down on VR. It just doesn't seem like it's hooking people as much as they had hoped. I mean, the PS5 is sold, or the PlayStation VR has sold many, many copies, or units, I suppose, but it's just not hooking people the same way. So I don't think they're going to lean into that. I think they're going to lean into higher resolutions, HDR, which they're already doing, and then also potentially higher frame rates. But to be perfectly honest, like, for Naughty Dog games as well, like, I don't need 144 hertz, 60 hertz. I'm a happy camper. I'll live with it. Maybe I'm a weirdo like that, but for me, 60 frames is perfectly playable. I'm very happy with that. I'm okay with 60 FPS. And if that's what they're going for, 4K at 60 FPS as the new standard, let's go. Let's do it. And I think that's very safe to assume. I always like more choice, though. If they have an option for 4K at 60 FPS or at like 1080p or 1440p, but with higher fidelity, I would love that if they can just give that option. But we'll see. As with all of these consoles, their strength is in their mass production. Same thing with the Xbox One X. The fact that you could get performance off of that was better than a comparably priced PC, that was because it's mass produced and they're selling millions or thousands and millions of these things. So it's easier to get the price lower, especially as the years go by. After like a year and a half, once they've really gotten into their groove, the price will drop pretty significantly, I have no doubt. Let's do this. So as for this thing, reasons why this wouldn't really make sense, Sony is not going to E3 this year. They've made that very clear, and they made that clear a while back. They said, we've shown off everything. We just don't have much to do. And they're also being very, very weird about signaling their future plans, which again implies that they're getting ready for a new console launch, but we're just not sure what that means. People that were saying The Last of Us Part 2 is going to launch on PS5, maybe like the original did, where they do a dual release, but they've already confirmed that this will be launching on PS4. So I don't see that as a viable option. But the one weird thing for me, and we'll touch on this in a few minutes when we talk about Anthem, it's very common for game studios to have a game, to push it back and delay it, not because it isn't ready for release, but simply because they want to make sure that it's pushed back to the point where they can release it at the ideal point. Sony has two large releases, or is working on two large releases at least. And like one of the big ones, of course, being Days Gone, which is on its way, and Death Stranding being another. What's more likely to me is that we're looking at either Sony trying to go out with a bang, have Death Stranding or having Days Gone take over the spring slot, and then releasing both The Last of Us Part 2 and Death Stranding in late 2019. Or what I see is more likely is Death Stranding coming in late 2019, and then The Last of Us Part 2 being the spring release around March or April of 2020. And then with the launch of the PS5 in late 2020 as well, they would release a remastered or upgraded version of it for the PlayStation 5 as another launch title, which seems to be in line with what they've already communicated. We'll just have to see. You know, there's a lot of ways that this could work. All of them are good. It just depends, really, it's pivotal, and it hinges on the fulcrum, which is the PlayStation 5. Whenever that's coming, that's what's going to determine how all the other dominoes fall. So it just depends on what they're planning to do with that. Hopefully it comes out sooner rather than later. I'm always down. It's one of those things. We look at games that are releasing now, like even The Last of Us Part 2 looks incredible. And we're like, how are they going to improve on that? How are they going to get it looking better than that? I mean, the thing you have to remember, though, is we were saying the same thing back in 2013. We're like, how are they going to improve on Rise? You remember Rise, the demo they showed off for the Kinect that eventually just turned up to be like a 6-hour QuickTime event? Like, we were saying that game looked so good. I don't know how you could improve it. And now we're saying the same thing years and years later. It's weird. All right. The other thing I want to touch on while we're on the topic of The Last of Us Part 2 is the fact that Ellie, it's been confirmed, Neil Druckmann gave an interview to BuzzFeed. He said Ellie will have an NPC companion in The Last of Us Part 2. What he says specifically is, in this GameSpot article, they describe it saying, quote, The Last of Us Part 2 writer and co-director Neil Druckmann announced that Ellie will be accompanied by an NPC in the upcoming game, The Last of Us Part 2. So far, the only gameplay we've seen is of Ellie and of her fighting solo against a murderous group of enemies. But apparently that isn't representative of the full game. And we found this out during this BuzzFeed interview. Druckmann didn't confirm who the NPC would be, saying, quote, well, so Ellie used to be an NPC, but she's the protagonist in this story. So the player is controlling Ellie. It's safe to say with the game that we made in the past that there will be some NPC with you in this story, even though we're not showing them in this demo. And fans are already beginning to hope that Ellie's companion will be Dina, the woman she kissed in the E3 2018 trailer. However, it could also be Jesse, Dina's ex, who spoke to Ellie at the beginning of the same trailer, the Asian guy. and seems to patrol on the outside of the protective community like Ellie does. We doubt that Part 2 will pull a switch on the original game's dynamic and make Joel the accompanying NPC, but anything's possible at this point. It might be one of the women from the Unsettling Paris Games Week trailer we got last year, or someone we haven't even been introduced to yet. And then they say, we don't know the launch date, blah, 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 etc., etc. Now, this whole topic, I think it's interesting. One of the big things that you have to understand about Naughty Dog games is that they use a narrative tactic that is, it's got a bunch of different names. I've heard it called a lot of different stuff, but I've heard it called reflection. I've heard it called mirroring. I've heard it called like diffusion. It always has to do with light for some reason. But anyway, yeah, it's gonna be me. I'm the NPC. But it basically what it is that the characters aren't very easy to show off by themselves, but rather they're easier to show off, and you can usually explain more and show off their character traits better when you can show them compared to somebody else. In contrast, mirroring, reflecting off of somebody else. So Joel, in the original game, you learn a lot about him while he goes through this world with Ellie because they reflect off of each other so well. Ellie reflects off of Joel in a very unique way. He makes her feel safe and secure in a world where she's never felt that way. And Joel also feels safe and secure around her, even though that doesn't seem to be it shouldn't be the case, right? And in that sense, they reflect off of each other. They feed each other, and they have good chemistry in that way. But with the sequel, the question is, what are they trying to show about Ellie? Because whatever you're trying to show is going to change who the partner and who the NPC is. Obviously, in the DLC to the original game that I did a little critique of back in the day, I called it The Kiss That Got People Pissed. And I thought it was a catchy tagline. I remember when I typed it into the title, little field on the YouTube upload screen, I typed it in and I was like, that's really good. I could see that being on a New York Times article or something. Like, it's catchy. It was straight fugazi. You're right, Simple Yak. But with that DLC, the Left Behind DLC, they were trying to show Ellie as somebody who wanted companionship and wanted to be loved. And they did that by showing the person that she loved, or at least had feelings for in some capacity. And it worked really well. I don't think it worked as well as a lot of sequences in the main game, but it worked really well for what it was trying to do. So with this game, of course, we don't know exactly what their end goal is. All we have been told about the main story is that the original game was about love, and this game is about hate. So whatever that means. If that means that they're going to put Ellie like paired with somebody that she doesn't like or that she's angry with, that could be really interesting. So if we're paired with Joel again and she's found out all the stuff and all the lies that Joel told her, or she found out that somebody killed her mother, or like she found out who killed her mother and she wants to go after them, and she's forced to work with people she doesn't like, that's when it works. The same reason that Nathan Drake worked in Uncharted 4, because you pair him with people that he doesn't like or that he would prefer not to be with, but he's forced to get over it and get through it, and that's when you see how he deals with difficult situations. That's when these characters come out and really shine. It's an effective tactic, especially in the video game industry, and so I'm not surprised at all that we are going to have to do that. But yeah, watch as the companion is her guitar. Everyone just ready to get to the game. It's like you just walk around, you fight with a guitar, you play slight little ditties and melodies to kill like screechers and screamer. What are they? Screamers, screechers. What are they called? That doesn't sound right. Screechers, screamers. That doesn't sound right at all. I will say this, Dangerous Man. Dangerous Man said that he doesn't have faith in Neil Druckmann in 2019. Clickers. Why was I saying screamers? I don't know. Clickers. Thank you, guys. I do agree. I think of any game that's released by Naughty Dog up until this point, the one that has the potential to be ruined by an overstretch of attempted social justice virtue signaling is The Last of Us Part 2. It's a potential thing. It's not to say that we don't want there to be quote unquote social justice in the world. It's not to say that we don't want all of the stuff that he wants in society, but it's to say when that becomes your modus operandi, when that becomes your main priority, everything else by definition is a lower priority. So previously, if the priority at the very top of the heap, at the top of the pyramid, was create an engaging story about love and forgiveness and companionship, now swapping that out and being, well, we need to show how kick-ass these lesbians can be, by definition, that story could potentially drop in quality. Maybe not, but it certainly could happen. And I think just from the trailers we've seen, I think it's very safe to say that there will be noticeably large steps that they've taken to try to take it up a notch. So get ready for that. I fully expect that to be a major player. Hopefully it doesn't get in the way of the game, but I could see it definitely being a problem for them. Now, the next topic. Kind of in the same vein as The Last of Us and Naughty Dog in general. The former director of Uncharted, one of the people that helped create it, Amy Hennig, she worked at Visceral Games, and she was hired by EA to work on a new Star Wars game that was going to be in the same vein as an Uncharted. So it was going to be a single-player, third-person, narrative, exploration-based title, but it was going to be heavily scripted, very cinematic, that style of game. But, of course, as you know, if you follow the gaming industry, it was shut down, and it was moved and reassigned to another group to work on it, and then that group was closed down as well, and so the project now is officially just gone. It's just dead in the water. And when this news launched, there was a ton of anger and ire around it, and justifiably so. You know, people were very, very excited about it, and it was the game everybody had been hoping for. You know, just the idea of a Star Wars game with the same quality and design as an Uncharted or a Naughty Dog game was very intriguing. Excuse me, with the yawn that's in the text. But it was, of course, not to be. In this interview, and this is coming off of an article on GameSpot, she actually explains some of the information and tidbits and details as to why this actually happened. So, quote, asked to reflect on her time at EA and working on Star Wars, Hennig told VentureBeat, who did the original interview, that the game faced a number of challenges. Starting off, Visceral as a developer was a, quote, very expensive studio to run, in part because it was in the middle of the San Francisco Bay Area. She said, quote, it's very hard to support compared to studios that cost a third of the price in places where you have tax credits. That's a hard sell. That was a constant drumbeat, feeling like you had to justify the existence of Visceral as a studio, end quote. And this is something I you know, of course, in recent videos, we've been talking a little bit more about the business side of the industry, and gamers don't like to accept that it is a business and there has to be financial considerations. There just have to be. And this is a huge issue, you know. This is why you have to consider whenever you start any sort of studio or company, you have to just consider where you're starting it, where you're forming it. Why do you think most corporations are sold out of or are founded out of Delaware? It's actually a big thing you talk about in business school. Why is Delaware such a haven for corporations to file? And there's a lot of pieces that go into it, but one of the big pieces is specifically with corporate law. There's a lot of precedent there, and so it's very, very comforting, and it protects the corporations a lot when you form in a state where there's the precedent. Whereas if they form somewhere else where there's a legal precedent they don't like, it could come back to bite them. So the location of a company is taken into heavy, heavy consideration. And for Visceral, if you're outside of the States and you're not aware, San Francisco as an area is incredibly expensive. The standard of living is very high, and the cost of living is even higher. It's exorbitant. It's very difficult to live there. So because of the way that these companies tend to work, they want to make sure that you are able to, at the very least, live when you work in that area. So in order to run a studio in the San Francisco Bay Area, you have to pay your employees significantly more than if they were working out of Dallas, or than if they were working out of, Toledo, Ohio. It's by definition going to be more expensive. Why are they there? Well, because there's a lot of talent there. People ask why, if Silicon Valley is so expensive in terms of property, in terms of everything, why would you go there? Well, because all the talent is there. If you want to have a lot of really smart whippersnappers work for you, a good idea is to found your company like outside Boston or near another huge university. Found and set up shop a few blocks from Harvard, and then you just set up a bunch of internships, and you get all the brightest talent. They come in, they get their internship, and you get all of the talent. Everybody wins. But for game development, it's very hard because artists are in short supply, and artists tend to like to live in beautiful places and have nice tastes because they're artists. So you don't, it's hard to say, but you don't tend to see a lot of artists living in, the middle of nowhere in Podunk. Is that an actual city? I think it is. In some middle of nowhere city where art isn't treasured as highly because you're just trying to survive, because the cost of living is lower. You don't tend to see a lot of artists live there. You don't see a lot of development studios. And for the same reason, you don't see a lot of development studios in New York or in Los Angeles in the same way that you do in other artist hubs. Like Montreal, there's a lot of tax credits and things that you can do, which is why Ubisoft has a ton of stuff there, even though Montreal for everybody else is incredibly expensive and has incredibly high taxes. For corporations, specifically in the artistic realm, they get a lot of kickback, which is what she's referring to here. So I don't blame them for looking at Visceral and being like, you guys are so damn expensive to keep up. You better have a great project for us, because it's very expensive. Visceral's Star Wars title was going to be a third-person, quote, cinematic traversal action game, Heddig said. And this led to the next problem. Making that type of game using an engine built for first-person shooter games, in other words, EA's Frostbite engine, was a, quote, hurdle, end quote. She went on to say, but we knew going in that was the goal. Or that was the goal. We were going to put this functionality into Frostbite. A lot of the team was hired to do Battlefield, and so that was a bit of a cultural shift to make this different kind of game, she said. Normally, you cash for the project you're working or you're making rather than trying to. It's hard to convert the people you have if that's not their type of game, end quote. This is something that's always really interested me, and I don't know why, but I've always thought if I were working in the game industry, if I was like a coder or an environment artist or something, I likely would have my favorite types of games. So, let's say I just have my taste in games right now. If I'm just trying to get a job in the industry and the first company that offers me a job is like a mobile app developer, so like Candy Crush, or maybe it's a racing game company, I'm not really passionate about those games, but it's a job, so I need to work on it. I need to sign with them, and I'll go do some work with them. I guess you just have to kind of suck it up. But I've always been really interested in how the studio makes sure that everybody is passionate in the same way that they are about the games that they're making. I think when you get to be like a Naughty Dog, you don't work for Naughty Dog unless you are a huge fan of Naughty Dog and you've always wanted to work for Naughty Dog. Like, they have the ability to be that picky, where the only people they're hiring are people who are passionate about their particular type of product. Whereas a larger company like EA, you hire or you apply, you get hired, and then you just kind of get shoved off in whatever corner they can fit you into. So I don't know. It's always just interested me how they would do that. But this makes sense that would be a consideration for them. A lot of their team worked on Battlefield, and they had to convince them that this was a good game to work on. They go on. The game was very far into development. Very far, Hennig said. Another challenge that came up was the game's shift in direction. Responding to market trends and player feedback, EA decided to, quote, pivot the design to make it a title that players could, quote, come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, end quote, which suggested that it was becoming more multiplayer focused. Hennig, who has extensive experience with single-player games like Uncharted, acknowledged that the game was trying to include, quote, other modes and extensibility, end quote, to make the title more than a purely linear game, but it never worked out. She went on and said, quote, I think that where EA is at right now, they're looking more at games as a service, the live service model, more open world stuff, trying to crack that nut, versus this finite crafted experience. We were trying to make sure that we built in other modes and extensibility and all that stuff, but the fundamental spine of the thing was more like Uncharted than one of these open world live service games. And that's a big gap to cross, end quote. And she went on, I don't know how you get from here to there and then try to push something that may not quite fit into the portfolio as it is today and try to do it at this really expensive studio. It was a bit of an uphill battle. All of that stuff is publicly known, end quote. And I mean, all this makes sense. I'm glad to hear that she's at least taking it like a champ. And she's not just, dissing EA left and right. She understands that they were in a tough spot. They didn't see this as fitting in with the rest of their portfolio. They didn't see this game fitting in with their lineup or being something that they wanted to push out. And so they were looking at it. They said, this is really expensive. And of course, we haven't seen the game. We don't know. It's very possible that EA looked at it and they're like, we have reason to believe that this is not going to sell as well as an Uncharted, that this is not going to be what everybody thinks it's going to be. So let's redo it. Let's work on it over again. Or, it's what most people believe, which is just that EA wanted more multiplayer and microtransactions, and they couldn't fit that into this game in the same way. And, of course, games like The Last of Us or Uncharted 4, they have online modes as well. I don't think anybody plays them, but they're there. I'm sure somebody plays them because they still make them. But I doubt that that's what they were looking for. I think they wanted the game itself to be online. And so Hennig went on. She admitted that she understands EA's decision to go a different way. And she said, quote, it was something we were struggling with the whole time. Does this make sense? Is this something EA really wants to do? I certainly regret the fact that there's a lot of good game there that I would love to see the light of day. A lot of people would. No one knows what might happen, or one never knows what might happen. And what happened is that the Visceral Star Wars game was rebooted with EA Vancouver put to work on the title. And then EA Vancouver used some of the same assets from Visceral's game, but transitioned the title to become an open world experience. And then this game was canceled in January, which is just a little heartbreaking. I understand that it was a tough spot for everybody, but nonetheless, let's just acknowledge how much it would suck to work on something for 3-4 years, pour your heart and soul into it, get super excited thinking that this could be the next big thing, thinking that this could be the next Uncharted, and then have it canceled. Not necessarily canceled at first, moved to another studio away from you. So you are taken out of the mix. And then after that, they cancel it outright. And it's never going to see the light of day. That just sucks. It just sucks. There's no other way to put it. It's a tough spot for them to be in. It's a tough spot for Amy. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that went on behind the scenes. But nonetheless, I think we can say EA, it just doesn't make sense that they poured so much money into it all this time and then they cancel it out of nowhere. It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Is something happening, Galfoud? Says something happened to the stream. Everything looks fine and up to me. No drop frames. Try refreshing. I guess you can't hear me if that's the case. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But it's going to be what it's going to be. What did you guys say in chat? Leesky said, that's the thing about predatory money, evil sync games. there are often passionate people behind the scenes who want the game to be balanced and fair and want it to do well. Ain't it funny that Apex is the biggest EA success lately, and that's the game EA had little to do with and was free to play? Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that weird? I mean, it's amazing when you make just a good game and that's the priority. It's weird. Like, it does well. Who would have thought? But it is just frustrating, and like we talked about this in the most recent video. There is a real separation between employees and management and the shareholders in a company like EA. Huge gap between employees and shareholders, because shareholders want future profitability. They want more microtransactions because that leads to growth. That means more money coming in, higher revenue, and they want every game to be a Candy Crush, right? Like they just wanted every game to be like that. And you can't blame them. That's how they make their money. You know, they expect a return on their investment, and that's rational and reasonable. And so in order to get the managers on the same page as the shareholders, they give the managers usually upwards of 40% of their compensation in stock options. So they buy a bunch of stocks in the company, and then they have the same expectation. They have the same desire for microtransactions, for the increased revenue, just get the money flowing. And so then the shareholders and the managers are on the same page, but the employees rarely get those stock options, or if they do, it's in much smaller amounts. So it just kind of sucks for everybody. And the employees aren't happy because they're working, but they don't get to do what they want. And, you know, it just sucks for everybody. It really does. But what are you going to do? Let's see. Leesky said they are saturating the market trying to copy the latest big thing when gamers already have that great game already, and aren't looking for a copycat. Yeah, the Battle Royale thing is interesting because it was always going to shift, right? It was always going to change, and there was always going to be some next game that came and started to dismantle Fortnite's lead. It's always going to happen, you know. It's life, death, and rebirth. It's always going to be that way. Just like PUBG, when it was at its peak, everyone was like, how the hell are you going to beat down PUBG? Everybody's playing it. And then Fortnite comes along. How are you going to beat Fortnite? It's a monster. And then Apex comes along. How are you going to beat Apex? And it's just going to be a little while until something comes along and beats it out. It just is how it works. As for Anthem, that's a good segue. We'll segue into that right here with, or maybe not. So as for Anthem's an interesting case. I have a theory, and I think I'm going to make a dedicated video on this because I honestly believe it. It really seems to me that EA knew this game was going to fail and hedged their bets in multiple ways to protect themselves.
Ooh, bitch.
This happened.
The plot is thickening.
Here we are. Oh dear. The canopy's...
My apologies. I didn't realize game audio was on. I had like a list. It's a list of like three little sliders for microphone and for speaker volume and for all those little items, so you can adjust it. And normally it's just those three. So it's just the three, like the PC audio, the microphone, and then headphones if I'm streaming a game. But on this scene, I didn't realize there was a fourth one beneath, so you had to scroll down to see it, and that fourth one was game audio, and it was turned all the way up. My bad, I suck. Anyway, it's fixed. Hopefully you can, I didn't kill your ears with that. But yeah, with Anthem, it's really interesting because this game, like, they said that they worked on it for 6 years. They said that they worked on it for years and years and years, and this was going to be the next big thing. This was going to be the evolution of narratives, and maybe they believed it at some point, but I honestly think as they got closer and closer to the release date, they realized this game was not going to be the thing that they were hoping it would be, and so they delayed it into a crowded field. They buried it in February and just hoped that players would kind of give it a shot, but move on very quickly and try out Apex instead. And that's why they released Apex when they did, to try to hedge their losses and their bets. And then they went and they did all these other weird things to push it. Yeah, they started this game right as like the Xbox One launched. How weird is that? How weird is that? Think about when they were showing off all the Kinect stuff. They were saying, yeah, you got to buy a Kinect with your Xbox. That's when they first started sketching out the ideas for this game. And this is what we got. Like, it's, you know, I don't want to be the party pooper. I don't want to be the guy that's like, come on, this is terrible work. This was terrible. What have you been doing? But that's really what it seems like. I do not understand what they've been doing for 6 years. And I don't think anybody else really gets it either. My assumption is that there were a lot of issues with development. They had to restart. They had to go back and do things over again. It was just a messy development process. But still, I don't think that's an excuse. And at some point, most of these problems that they've had are in relation to the Frostbite engine. EA needs to create like Frostbite RPG. They need to put a ton of money into a version of Frostbite that is designed for open world RPG style games, because they keep releasing those style games and the engine just doesn't seem to be able to do it. A lot of these studios have been doing work to alter the engine so that it works for them, but clearly it just wasn't built for that purpose. It just wasn't designed for that. It was designed for high fidelity graphics in smaller areas with lots of particle effects, but it's not meant for quick loading, for quick streaming of data in and out. It just isn't designed for that. I wonder if they had to, quote, pivot it into a Destiny clone style game. I mean, you certainly see the influences. There is no doubt about it. There are some real Destiny pieces copy and pasted all over the place in this guy. And I have no doubt that there were managers looking at this and saying, we need it. Clearly, Destiny's making a ton of money. Let's get it a little closer to that and give Destiny a run for their money. But what they failed to realize is that Destiny has rough launches. Usually, like Destiny 2 had a really rough launch. But they've had all this time to build up the economy, to build up the content base, and now they can do it. It's the same thing with Red Dead Online. Red Dead Online, I'm convinced, was never going to be successful. Another video I'm probably going to make. Red Dead Online, see, this is why you watch the show, because you get to hear about all the video ideas I have before they turn into videos. But like Red Dead Online, it's the Wild West. Like, it's not Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto, it's set in the modern day with cars, planes, boats, parachutes, guns, RPGs, missiles, like tanks. You can do whatever you want in that game, and that's the point. In the Wild West, you can ride a horse, and if you really want to upgrade your stuff, you can get a better horse. And then you want a better hat, you can get a better hat. Like, it's just not the same thing. Maybe they'll deck it out to the point where eventually you can buy like a full-on ranch, and you can, there's an economy there, so you can balance taking care of like trading livestock and doing all these things and be a full-on cowboy in the Wild West. And I think eventually they'll get there, but it's going to take a long time. And even then, I'm not sure if the player base is going to be that interested in it. I don't know if Red Dead Online, when people download it, or pull it up, I don't know if they expect to see, cow trading as a major game mechanic. Maybe they do. Maybe that's something I'm just wrong on. But it just doesn't seem like it was ever going to have the potential of Grand Theft Auto 5, which I have to imagine they foresaw, which is why they didn't put it. People are like, why did Rockstar put so little money into, or so little effort into Red Dead Online? And I think it's because they knew it wasn't ever going to be the same thing. It wasn't ever going to be on the level of Grand Theft Auto 5. And so instead of just letting it sort of floundered, they just said, well, we'll put a little bit of work into it, and then we'll see what the engagement's like. Then we'll tailor our efforts accordingly, instead of pouring half of our efforts into that first and then going everywhere else and putting the effort in. So I don't know. It's weird. I hope it turns great, but I dropped into Grand Theft Auto 5 for an hour a couple nights ago to collect some footage, and I realized that it's so unbelievably vast. There is so much to do. It really is hard to quantify. It really is. Like, there's everything from race car driving to plane races to tricks that you do with your bikes, and you see who can race through the city, climbing up and down and around skyscrapers. Like, it's just to a whole nother level, and it's to a level that Red Dead Online I don't think can ever get to. But I think that's comforting at the same time, because I think that probably means that a Grand Theft Auto 5 or a comparable Rockstar release is probably on its way. And I, to be perfectly honest, I'm okay with that. But I mean, that's why it's so weird. Red Dead Redemption 2 sold millions upon millions upon millions of copies in its first few days, and over the course of the last few months, the stocks have dropped for Take-Two Interactive, just because Red Dead Online was not what people were hoping. I don't even know. But there was at least a passive mode and a sensible report system. Red Dead Online had none of that. Yeah, I should drop in and try Red Dead Online again, because I haven't played it since around launch. I played it like 2-3 days in a row around launch with roommates and some friends. I haven't played it since. I should give it a shot, because I know they put a lot of effort into it since then, but it just doesn't seem like it's quite there. I don't know, online stuff is just hard. It's just hard, and part of it I kind of understand. It must be a nightmare to try to figure out what thousands upon thousands or millions of players, what effect they're going to have on a system before having those players put that stress on the system. To just try to assume or project out what is going to happen, it must be a nightmare to try to figure out. Because one of the benefits and one of the advantages that Grand Theft Auto 5 has is that they've been doing this for years and years and years. So yeah, it's down to a fine-tuned science. Same thing with Destiny. They know what their players want because they got to try it one time around before. And, they just have been doing their thing. And I don't think that that's the same benefit that BioWare had. BioWare had never done this before, and so Anthem was kind of left out to dry. But anyway, yeah. Good talk, everybody. Go team. It's as with all these things, there's always a lot to discuss, and there's always more to discuss. But that's why we have multiple episodes of the show, so that we can take it apart piece by piece, brick by brick. As always, once again, if you were not able to come out with us live, make sure you check us out on Twitch or follow me on Twitter so you get notified of when that happens. And we'll go from there. What was The Last of Us Leaks about? Again, Last of Us Leaks saying that it'll release sometime October of 2019. Reasons for it, reasons against it. It's a total crapshoot. If I had to put money on it, I don't think I would put money on October. I don't know why. Maybe I'm crazy. Let me know your thoughts on this. It seems to me that Death Stranding would come before The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know why that seems to be the case to me, but I just have that hunch, and I don't know. I feel like I read a report, or we might have talked about it on the show, that Hideo Kojima said that Death Stranding was very far along development. It was getting close to being finished, and we haven't heard the same thing about The Last of Us Part 2. We've heard a lot of issues with The Last of Us Part 2. Apparently they've had to go, and there's a bunch of broken sequences. Neil Druckmann was saying the parts that we've shown off, those are the only really finished parts in the game. Everything else is a broken mess. Like, the skeleton's there, but we're trying to fix all the crap that's wrong with it everywhere else. So I don't envy their position, but I think that Death Stranding is probably a little closer. I think they finished all the mocap, and usually that's pretty close to release. Fallout 4, they were doing mocap all the way up until like 8 months before launch. So I think we're in a good spot. Thoughts on the release dates and how 4 games got released on the same day. Like I said, I think it was intentional to bury all of these games together. I forget who said it within EA, but it was one of their executives. I think it might have even been the CEO. He said that Anthem was not delayed for quality control reasons or for polishing reasons. It wasn't like they weren't done with the game. They were done with the game. And he said that very, very clearly and tersely. We were done with the game. It just wasn't the right time for it to be released. Now we know it wasn't the right time to be released because they wanted to make sure that it released with other games so it could get buried. And so they would have hedged their bets against their potential success anyways. Which, actually happens a lot, believe it or not. Like, even the film industry does it a lot, and the music industry. If there's an album or if there's a film that they don't foresee being super successful, they'll just delay it into a less busy or more busy slot so that they have a reason and an excuse to talk to their investors and say, yeah, no, I guess just the time slot was super competitive. That's crazy. And especially when they don't believe in the product to begin with, you'll see them doing things like shoving it in the corner and letting it kind of fail publicly, which is just unfortunate, but that's how it works. Weirdly. Yeah, and can I just say, I find it so funny nobody's talking about Crackdown 3. Crackdown came out, everyone's like, it sucks, and then just moved on. And that was their goal. You'll notice it was a very, very quietly released title. No press, no posters outside of GameStop or outside of Best Buy. Like, they just put it out there, and then they're just gonna let it drift away and try to forget about it because it was not what it should have been. It just was not what it should have been. Yeah, I feel bad for Xbox guys that were really looking forward to it because they were just straight shafted. They deserved so much better than what they got. But any game that goes on in development hell like that, it just can't ever do well. It just can't. It's too bad, but it just can't. Far Cry New Dawn, that one's just weird to me because it seems like they just knew they had to get a Far Cry out this year, so they just shoveled it out, even though it clearly was not what people were hoping. So, if I had to recommend a shooter, I would recommend playing Metro instead. I've been playing through Metro, and I'd recommend that instead of Far Cry New Dawn. As you guys know, the second I saw the trailer for Far Cry New Dawn, I was like, Jump Force, I've heard about it. I haven't looked into it. I actually plan on doing that right after I hop off stream, because I've heard funny things about it. And as for, there's one more, the European special, the 100,000 subscriber stream. Well, I'll tell you my initial plan. So we did the first half of the 100,000 subscriber celebration pretty close after when we hit it. And then I was like, we're going to do another one for European viewers so that the time zone works out a little easier for everybody. And my initial plan was to do an unboxing of the silver play button during that stream and then just blend them all together. But there's been some delays. The YouTube contact I got has been saying that, it just takes time because they have to verify your channel isn't like filled with hate speech or anything. So they have to go through and they have to analyze all of your videos and break them all down, make sure you aren't exploiting children. Like they take it pretty seriously before they give you a silver play button. They check you out and they make sure like it's a full-on background check. But they're doing that right now. So hopefully we can get the silver play button unboxed. It just seemed like I'm going to have to stream unboxing the silver play button. Like there's no way that you don't stream that or like record that. But I don't know. I'll break it apart. I'll figure it out. I'll think about it. Find a better time for it. But as always, thank you for watching. Check out the newest videos if you haven't seen them. Show them some love. They've gotten a little bit buried in the sea of content that's been coming out. But check them out if you haven't. I think you'll like them. I'm fairly proud of them. They were fun. Caught a cheater in Apex Legends, and then also break down some of the finances in the gaming industry in general, and why we're probably over the hump when it comes to nasty business practices in the industry, which is good. It's a good thing. But anyway, check those videos out. I'll appreciate it. I love you all. Thank you so much for coming out. As always, hugs and kisses, love and affection. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.